Howdy, we're back in the garage, and I have to say thank you to everybody that gave their opinions and thoughts on what I should do with the build following the discovery that the engine is a little bit ropey. I was expecting a bit of a landslide towards the K-swap, if I'm honest, but it really wasn't that. I think it was more or less even between the K and the B. I think overall the arguments for staying B series were probably a little bit stronger than those to go K. So I mulled it over for a couple more days, and I didn't really get anywhere, to be fair. I was still umming and ahhing. But then two things happened. I had eyed up a replacement exhaust manifold for the Skunk 2 because of the clearance issues underneath. It was unfortunately out of stock when I went to buy it about 3 weeks or so ago. And then I had a notification from eBay, or maybe a targeted advert or something like that anyway, saying that it was back in stock and I could use a voucher code and land myself £75 off. I'm not going to get that again in a hurry. And then, turns out that pretty much everything I needed to convert back to a single throttle body was available, with quality parts as well, about 10 minutes from my house. And if those two things aren't assigned to stay B, I don't know what is. So I jumped on it, and we now have a lovely selection of parts. Thanks to Giwa for supplying these lovely shiny tubes. I've seen pictures of these fitted and they give substantially more clearance than the Skunk 2 one. And then thanks to Sam for breaking his Integra race car. We've got a Skunk 2 Ultra intake manifold, which he's ported all the way through. You can't really see, but that's lovely and smooth in there. Skunk 2 Pro throttle body, some 550cc grams injectors, this nice Ram Air enclosed air filter, IACV valve and relocation plate, and he's also been kind enough to give me a load of cold air feed and piping instead of going in bits and pieces, so I can make a nice intake that can suck in some lovely cold air, which is something the bodies never really did. So yeah, all in all, great success. I actually made a decision. And now on to slightly less positive things. Obviously we already knew there was an issue with the engine, but after I'd bled it up after Castle Combe, it seemed to be fine. I even did an hour or so test drive before it went to Tom's, and it drove to Tom's fine, drove back, no issues whatsoever. So I thought we'd have a final drive with the throttle bodies on. I went out today with Shaden with his new Subaru. As you can see, it was rather dirty and rather wet. So my nice clean engine bay, no longer quite so nice and clean. You may also notice that my expansion tank is rather full, and it has in fact deposited quite a lot of coolant down onto the splitter. This was joined by a lot of instances of the engine management light coming on, and I'm pretty confident that was the same overheating protection light, because when I flicked it off, back on again, disappeared. And when exploring the rev limiting at 5,000 RPM, so exactly what I've set to happen. And then coming back into Swindon, when I was just a couple of miles from home, I did notice it was getting actually very hot because the coolant gauge on the dash was starting to climb quite rapidly. So I had to pull over and let it cool down for a bit. So clearly there is an issue. I'm pretty confident, given the rise in the coolant, obviously taking on quite a lot of pressure, that there is going to be a head gasket failure. Maybe alongside piston rings, God knows. I think it's probably time we stopped speculating and got our head off to see exactly what is going on. On another note, I did manage to park my splitter into a curb, causing a nice little crack there. Just the icing on the cake really, I think. Let's get the spanners out and let's get to work. bad of a job in the end. Probably didn't take as long as I thought. However, it definitely needed doing. So let's have a quick run through of what I found so far. First thing I noticed was all of the cylinders were rather moist. There are actually puddles of coolant in cylinder 4 and cylinder 2, which I've now cleaned out. And I think that probably has something to do with the head gasket being royally goosed. It's a Buddy Club 2-layer 4mm gasket, so really thin. And as you can see, the coating on both sides is pretty much gone around all of the cylinder walls. So that obviously explains the coolant issues and probably the oil burning issues as well. To my very untrained eye, the head actually looks okay. I've sent some pictures to Tom, who thinks there's a little bit of a sign of pre-detonation, which I'll have to take his word for because I don't really know what I'm looking at. I have cleaned it up a little bit since it's come off. Unfortunately, the issues do not stop there. If we have a closer look at the pistons, you should be able to see that there is clear evidence of piston to valve contacts on all 4 of them. Just on the exhaust side, most noticeably on cylinder 3. And this is extremely annoying and somewhat worrying as well, because really it is one of the absolute basics in building an engine like this. The builder has to get the piston to valve clearances right, and clearly in this case he is far from right. So if that's been overlooked, what else in the engine has been overlooked? Having spun the head over, again, on the face of it, everything looks pretty good. Got the Skunk 2 Alpha springs and retainers in there. Should have been the Pros, but we've discussed that previously. However, if we come over to this one, let's lift up the rockers, you may notice that that one is not quite how it should be. It's in several pieces, some of which are down here. Brilliant. Yeah, safe to say I'm feeling a little bit disheartened about the whole thing right now. There's not really one part of the engine that I'm fully happy with. The bottom end obviously has the cheap eBay shite pistons in it, which are now also damaged. Remember, we've got the issue with the oil gallery on the back as well. Given the significant head gasket failure, there's absolutely no guarantee that this face and the corresponding face on the head don't need remachining. Top end, obviously the incorrect components fitted to that as well than what I was sold, and we've got the fractured valve spring in here. One small positive is that I'm pretty sure it is actually a B16B head, which is what I was sold. You should be able to see the porting just down there by the bottom of the valves, which is something that you only get on the Type R heads. So I did actually get something that I was sold, which is nice. So yeah, don't really know what else to say. I'll let you know what I decide to do.